when we were talking about indoctrinating kids and stuff, it seems like there are some parallels in how a gang can get a kid off the streets to come join their gang, and how these people can recruit a kid, to come be part of their organization.
Right.
Are the I guess the things that they would look for in a recruit kind of the same, like a kid that doesn't have anybody to hang out with. He doesn't have a good family life.
Yes, that's one of them. Yes.
So, like with a gang, that's what they would look for. Like, hey, come be part of this. We'll make you whole. You can be, one of us, that type thing. Is that kind of the same tactic that's used by the terrorist organizations?
Initially, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we have to also look at indoctrination overseas versus indoctrination here.
Right.
Overseas, it's a different type of indoctrination. You live in a community. Yeah. Right. And whoever is ruling that community, for example, and I'll use a hypothetical of, let's say when ISIS came to power and they were running Raqqa, right, Syria, they would implement in the school system,
right,
religious texts,
okay,
which would be basically used as indoctrination. Mm-hmm. Now, that doesn't mean that the religious text that they were using is actual religious text, because to a 7-year-old, 8-year-old, 9-year-old, they don't have the capability of questioning anything, and they don't know, they can't go research. You have a guy comes in and says, this is what the Quran says. This is what the Hadith said. This is what the Prophet says. That child is being indoctrinated based on the culture because it's embedded into the school. I went through that from 1980 until 1987, right? In addition to being taken out to learn how to clear landmines. And when I told that story to people, which were, in 27 years, I really didn't share that much.
Yeah.
And we can get into that as to why.
Yeah.
Because I got targeted several times. Yeah. Because the latest one is because I'm a goat herder. Mm. You know what I'm saying? Which is sad, but to be fair, that's not all the law enforcement. 800,000 cops, I've only experienced that 3 times.
Right.
You get what I'm saying? So you can't really say that it's like a systemic problem. But when that person, when I went through that process, we had afternoons, we had religious studies, right? And the people who would come in to teach you the religious studies were people who were associated with militant groups, right? Whichever their interpretation is. Luckily, my grandpa was very well versed, so I had a balance at home, because when I would hear something bad, I would ask my grandpa, "Hey, this is what they say," and he's like, No, that's not what's going on here. Let me tell you what the reality of this is. Gotcha. So I kind of had that counterbalance. But imagine over there, somebody doesn't have that counterbalance. They're believing what this guy is telling them. He's holding the AK-47. A child at 7 years old, they want a superhero to look up to anyway. Here's a guy in the classroom with a gun, and they're like... So
it'd be no different than if you've got a kid whose dad was a blood, his grandpa was a blood.
He's born into his
cousins... Everybody in his family is a blood. That's normal to him.
Right. You are a product of your society.
Or even, like, if you want to go on, like, the religious side. So a person who was, over here, who was raised up, their family was part of a religious extremist group over here, that does some things that aren't, exactly okay through the mainstream Christian people.
Right.
And they have a compound, and they have all these, we've seen this stuff all over the country, especially out west. And to them, that's completely normal.
Yes.
But then if a person who did not grow up in that's like, oh, I want to go join that would be abnormal to them. They'd be like, whoa, this is kind of strange.
Exactly.
It's completely normal in their culture because that's how they were raised. And that's the same thing you're talking about.
Same thing. And that's overseas. That's overseas. When you look at United States, there's a different, it's more of the gang.
Yeah.
So, and I'll give you a scenario. There's a guy in Austin. Okay. He was one of those Antifa people.
Yeah.
Okay. When all of this Israeli-Palestinian thing started, he joined the movement. And I don't think he's on TikTok anymore. He was on TikTok. In the process, within 3 months, he converts to Islam.
Okay.
Within a month after that, he's flying Hamas flags.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying? And this is a guy who's literally on TikTok being indoctrinated. Then he starts feeling important because he's surrounded by people from the UK, from Sweden, from Pakistan, from other parts of the world, because on TikTok Lives, they can get on there and talk to each other. And he's being influenced. And the dude is Austin, Texas. And the whole time I'm thinking to myself, oh shit. All it takes is for this dude to just snap.
Right.
And what it has to do, what is he going to do? Go down 6th Street, people are partying, and just start wailing at everybody.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying? This is how easy it is. Now, what drove him to that point? I don't know his psychological background. I don't know what kind of household he came out of. Yeah. I can tell you he was spending about 18 hours a day on TikTok.
Right.
And if you're doing that 7 days a week, that tells me you ain't working.
Yeah.
And if you ain't working, that means there's something going on.
Yeah.
Right? So you could have a gamer who's having parental problems, right? Comes from a divorced family. You could have someone, and I'll tell you, I've seen this a lot, where you have a family that's overzealot into their own religion, right? And they push their children out of the religion. So that child is now seeking belonging to another group.
Right.
And then he says that on a gaming chat or on a, Instagram live or something to do with somebody else somewhere else. Yeah. And then they use that as a entry point.
Right.
Come be a part of us. We're all brothers.
Right.
So it's a little bit of a different dynamic.
Yeah.